I live in a neighborhood where the pizza arrives faster than the cops a lot of the time. And I've heard that line used all the time in TV and even in speeches, right? But it still seems like people forget that this is a thing. And in a way, that's a good thing because it means that most people, as a result of their own blessings, don't really live in a reality where the police wouldn't arrive in time or arrive at all. Which to me means that they're from communities where there are enough resources and enough officers for timely emergency responses, and where there isn't so much going on that police departments are spread too thin for the community's own good, right? And the communities where police aren't arriving in time, these communities, the people of these communities have known for ages that the police cannot be trusted, not only because they don't arrive at all or because they arrive late, but because they often mistreat, harass, and even kill those that they're supposed to protect. And it's a shame that this distrust for the police among the people of these underprivileged communities, right? That this distrust has only recently became public knowledge ever since the killing of Trayvon Martin, basically in early 2010s, so maybe 2014 to 2015. And as much as it's a shame, at least as a start, at least people outside of these communities are finally waking up to the fact that not everyone is as lucky as them to be in a place where the police could be expected to arrive on time and not be a threat to you. Yet, it surprises me that these fortunate people are out there protesting against police brutality, but that they're also the same ones protesting for gun restrictions. And they know that the one entity that's supposed to protect the community is untrustworthy and a lot of times can be dangerous. And they also know that these communities unfortunately only have themselves to rely on for protection, but they're out here trying to get guns taken away. It is because the people who come from these underprivileged communities, it's because of the fact that they have to rely on themselves that they often turn to carrying weapons. It's because they live in a place where self-defense is not a hypothetical just in case, but an actual everyday practice. When people like this carry guns, it doesn't make them violent, it makes them self-responsible. The way that I see it, gun control is inherently anti-minority because guns are most needed in poor communities that struggle with crime. And as we all know, these communities are virtually entirely inhabited by people of color. What I am saying right now is what these people have been saying for decades. And the reason maybe it's news to you is because you're not around those people. And before anybody looks at their favorite politician, remember that there is not one politician in Congress that actually cares about these people. They just say that they care so that they could win their elections and so that all their fans could applaud them for the charity work that they're supposedly doing to help the oppressed. But they actually really don't care. These communities have been in need of help for decades. And one politician after the other has come into power and not one thing has changed. But because these politicians are often seen as role models by privileged people who don't know the realities the less fortunate face, whatever these politicians support becomes popular among them and basically among the entire country. This is why we see people protesting against police brutality, but then going on and supporting laws that crack down on the possession of firearms. It's surprising to me that the blatant contradiction of these two things isn't obvious. But how could I expect it to be? To me, it's just amazing that we live in a world where people who can trust the police and the government are on their high horses, happy because they feel woke and progressive, but fail to realize that they're basically saying that you need to take away firearms and police need to be fired because you're out there killing innocent people who need your help. It's no wonder these people can't trust you. And then the next week, they're chanting, take away the only protection these people have. I know that gun on gun violence is a thing. But pointing that out doesn't invalidate the point that people in communities with high crime rates who cannot trust the police, people of color, should have guns. And there's no shying away from it. A lot of gun control is anti-minority. But obviously, gun on gun violence is a thing. Maybe I think it's common sense because of how and where I came up and still live. But violence always finds a way to exist. I don't know how that isn't common sense. I don't know why it isn't obvious that if owning guns was illegal or harder, people would still find a way to own them. If that isn't obvious to you, I think you're naive because you're blessed. And that's actually good for you. Good for you. I live in New Jersey where gun restrictions are tough. And what you see are good people who should own weapons because they can't trust the police. You see these people walking around defenseless because they follow the laws, while bad people still break the laws and still carry guns. Is the fact that this happens really hard to believe? Like, do people really not see the problem with this at all? There's a reason why 98% of all mass shootings occur in gun-free zones. And that's according to the Crime Prevention Research Center. What surprises me even more is that when I voice these concerns, people bring up mass shootings as an example as to why guns are evil and why I, therefore, must be against life. 98% of shootings occur in gun-free zones. If anything, you're anti-life. It's obvious to me. People like to hit easy targets. It's the same reason why bullies pick on the small kid but not the other kid who they know would fight back. But let me just entertain the stupidity for a little bit. Let's just say guns didn't exist. Okay, no one has a gun anymore. Do you really think violence would magically end? All the gun-on-gun violence would become knife-on-knife violence. And if knives were out of the picture, it would become something-on-something-else violence. Weapons are not the problem. And if you really think that they are, you need to take a step back and really consider how lucky you are. I have yet to meet one person who is pro-gun control and comes from a rough community, grew up around non-whites, and distrusts the police. Not one. And that's how I know I'm not the only one who feels this way. And that's how I know that what I'm saying is nothing new. It's nothing revolutionary. The people who are pro-gun control are either white or people fortunate enough to come from decent communities. And even people who actually blindly believe in what politicians say, as if politicians should be trusted to begin with. The way that I see it, most of the people protesting against police brutalities are what you call allies. People who could never really understand something, but kind of just stand along people who are harmed by an issue. And in my head, they do this because they want to win social points, but that's beside the point. So most of the people protesting against police brutality, right, allies, they can trust the cops. They tend to look at killings of innocent people, jailing of not guilty people, and basically overall police incompetence. They tend to look at these things as isolated instances, right? So they tend to look at these tragedies, for example, like the death of George Floyd, as problems with individual police. and not failing institutions. They can't grasp that these things actually do happen every day and all the time, and that only a small fraction of them make the news. So when they're done protesting, they go home and they think they did something. These people, they know that the police mess up, but deep down, whether they want to admit it or not, do trust the police and cannot ever imagine having to protect themselves in a neighborhood where you can't walk outside without always looking over your shoulder and knowing that no one is there to help. That's why it's so easy for them to think that because they don't have to carry guns, no one else has to. If you're out there protesting police brutality but support gun control, I ask one thing of you. Go into the communities you're allegedly trying to help and ask them if they trust the police. Ask them whose responsibility it is to protect them. And when they say they can only trust themselves, think about why they feel that way and why you don't. And why they want the protection of firearms, but why you're out there protesting them. Tightening gun restrictions does one thing. It makes law-abiding citizens give up their protection while people who are already out there doing wrong find a way to still carry guns. You disarm good people without disarming bad people. To me, there's no way to put it. Gun control is anti-minority. Let me know what you think. Stay safe, and thanks for listening.